Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about how international students can get into the Ivy League. This has been a pretty requested video in the comments, and as an international student myself, I thought it'd be kind of beneficial to, do a bit of research. For context, I'm from Canada and I'm applying to some of the Ivies this year. Alright, so let's dive right in. First of all, we want to see how much of a disadvantage international students really have. And to do that, we're going to look at this acceptance rate from the University of Pennsylvania. Out of every single Ivy League school or, top 20, this is the only public international acceptance rate data, and it's from the University of Pennsylvania. They say that 3.5% of international students were accepted, so it's a pretty low acceptance rate. Out of 12,000, only 431 people got in. So that puts the international acceptance rate here, and the normal acceptance rate at 5.8%. But this is not really the proper calculation yet, because we need to check what's the difference between an international and a domestic applicant. So let's just check over that really quick. To calculate the domestic applicant chances, we can just put in the number of total applicants minus the number of international applicants to get the number of domestic applicants. From there, we can put A into its formula, and let's say A represents the acceptance rate for domestic students. And obviously, this is a proportion of the probability that's made up by internationals, and this is the proportion made up by domestics. So we get the domestic acceptance rate to be around 6.4%. And that means that they have around a 1.8 times advantage compared to internationals. Now, that sounds kind of bad at first glance, and it might actually be. So we're going to take a look at how bad it really is, though, in this video. So why are rates actually lower? By finding out the reason for why rates are lower, we'll be able to see how international students can push their specific advantages or how they can differentiate themselves among other international applicants. So here are some of the possible reasons why it seems like international students can't get in. Number one is financial aid. A lot of Ivies are not need blind, and we'll take a look at that in a second. Second thing is quotas. There's some stuff going around that people say that, some Ivies, they basically set quotas. They want 10, 20% of the class to be international, and after that, they're not going to accept any more. Although there might be obviously small fluctuations year to year. The third thing is applicant quality. So people sometimes say that, internationals are just less qualified applicants because the education system is different. Internationals might not have the correct prerequisite courses, or they might just be, they might not have completed, they might not have had good relations with their teachers, guidance counselors, etc., etc. Also, there's a lot of students who are just trying to apply to Ivies to try to get a full ride and study in the US, so this can kind of lower the applicant quality. Okay, so let's take a look at this first argument, which is this financial aid argument. So here's all the US schools that are need-blind to internationals. Not many. There's only 8 schools, and Brown is only coming in 2025. So you can see out of the Ivy League, there's 3 schools, which are UPenn, Columbia, and Cornell, which are basically not need blind for international since they're need aware. So we're going to compare and take a look at some of these international acceptance rates then. There's also some schools which are need blind for some countries, and specifically University of Pennsylvania is need blind for Canadians and Mexicans. But this is not really a big deal because Canadians and Mexicans tend to not make up that much of the university international applicant proportions. It's around maybe 10-20% maximum. It's not that much. So let's take a look. Harvard has a need blind policy, and this is their percent of international undergrads starting from 2018 going to 2023. You can see that the rate has been slowly going up, and this is available from the Harvard Common Data Set, so you can search that up. Obviously, there's a small drop here during COVID. For example, students withdrawing, going just to study in their home country, or deferring entry because they don't want to go to US. Maybe they're even banned from traveling. But you can see the acceptance rate's been slowly going up. And what this kind of shows is that, hey, maybe this kind of the third argument about applicant quality might be true, because what you can kind of say here is that as the global development goes up, then obviously the average applicant quality is going to go up with more people getting access to education, etc., etc. And because of that, the global rate is going to rise the global amount of qualified applicants is going to rise faster than the domestic rate of qualified applicants is rising. So therefore, there's just going to be more and more qualified and really, really skilled internationals. So it kind of shows this third argument is kind of true. And it also kind of dispels the second argument with quotas, right? If it's rising, how can there be quotas? So The financial aid one is not really that relevant because, Harvard's NEET blind, but it might come into play later. Now let's take a look at Yale though, which provides a very different picture. You can see Yale has had a very, very similar amount of international undergrads from 2018 to 2023. There's been 2 drops here, and this one, I'm not too sure how to explain it, maybe just like a natural decrease, but here's obviously COVID where it drops. But you can see it's around 10% if you just add up all these numbers. And it's not like it's going up, which is very clear in Harvard. It's actually just staying the same. So this is very odd, right? You can see Yale and Harvard have a very different proportion of international undergraduates. Harvard is rising while Yale has had a constant around 11% of students being international students. We'll take a look at that in a second, but to drive this even further, we're going to take a look at Cornell, which we know is a NEET-aware school. And you can see it's very similar to Yale. It has around 10% international students, obviously with the drop in COVID, but here, same thing, around 10% of Cornell students are internationals. So what is the point I'm trying to make here, right? We can see that a lot of this data is kind of confusing. Harvard is rising, but we're not sure why, while Cornell and Yale are the same. And even further, Cornell has a very similar amount of undergraduates that are internationals compared to Yale, while Cornell is NEET aware and Yale is NEET blind. And this is just kind of weird. Additionally, this applicant quality argument seems kind of odd because it's only occurring in Harvard and not in any other Ivy League school that we've examined. So to actually discover the truth, we're going to have to take a look at this book, Valedictorians at the Gate, which is by a former Ivy League admissions director. In particular, this was a director of Dartmouth. Now, they were a director at a time when Dartmouth was NEET aware for internationals. Now it's NEET blind, but this is basically this book. And there's 2 passages which I think are very important. The first one is here. Basically, because of the financial aid policies, the international admissions process at Dartmouth was more competitive than the domestic review. This is pretty important because it shows that, yes, financial aid and financial need does actually play a role into the acceptance rate. So if you're a student which basically has a lot of financial need, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to get in compared to a international student who is basically a full pay student. They can pay for everything themselves. So that makes the international admissions process more competitive. And the next thing is here, basically, where you can see here that approximately 6 to 10% of each class was foreign students. And this is kind of going into that quota argument, right? You can see there might actually be some quotas. Now, it's not revealed exactly, but it's around 90 students per year are being admitted that internationals, and this just sounds a lot like a quota. But down here is something that's pretty important, because I'm going to talk about the quota in a second, but the other slots had to be carefully balanced among many countries in order to maintain diversity of citizenships. And this is something that people do not talk about enough. Ivy League schools are looking for diversity among their applicant pool, and one way they're looking for diversity is through their geographic location. So for example, India has a very, very large population, a very high amount of qualified students. While, for example, you're not, and a lot of those people are applying to Ivy League schools. But for example, if you're from Tuvalu in the Pacific, you're from some random island where there's 1 or 2 people, maybe a year, that even try to apply for Ivies, then you have a much higher chance, because what Ivies want to do is number one, they want to increase the number of countries they can say are represented at their school. But number 2, they want diversity on campus. And one of the ways they want to do that is through having a geographic diversity. So even if you're 5% worse than the average American applicant, but you're from a very rare country, you're one of the only people, maybe you're the only person from your country who's even applying, and you're pretty qualified, you have a much higher chance of getting in than, for example, someone from India, even if they're 150% better than the average American applicant. Just because there's so much competition from India, then what happens is that Ivy League schools will make it a bit harder for Indians to get in. And this is something that people aren't talking about. Now, this is in reference to the quota argument. And this is basically talking about a Japanese student who visited Dartmouth and they were waitlisted. What they wanted to do is try to convince the admissions officers to let them in. It didn't work, and the reason is because even in early April, we had already received a significant portion of international student commitments, right? What this kind of really proves is that there is a quota, and they do want a specific amount of international students from different countries in the Ivy League every single year. And you can see here, right, if international students are dropping from the wait list, they're going to accept more internationals, like admitted internationals are like not going to Dartmouth, they're going to Harvard or something. Then Dartmouth is going to admit internationals from the wait list in order to try to, fill up that quota of international students. And this is seen in Yale and Cornell. Now in Harvard, the admissions, the proportion of internationals is going up. But this can actually be attributed to a difference in Harvard's set quota that's being slowly changed over time compared to a trend in the average applicant quality going up. So why are rates so low, right? We just talked about all these reasons, and now we're going to list them based on how basically important or pressing or like how important they are in admissions committee room. Quotas are pretty high priority. Every school has a set quota, and some of them are increasing like Harvard, but typically it's around 10-12% of students are international students, and that's what makes it so hard for internationals to get in. The next thing is financial aid. If you are a full pay student, you're going to have a much higher chance of getting in. Even for example, a school like CMU doesn't even offer scholarships or financial aid to internationals. You have to be full pay. But for the Ivies, they can offer some need, but it's going to be harder to get in as a need-aware student who needs a lot of like financial need compared to a full-pay student. And you can see that from the Dartmouth book. The next thing is applicant quality. Now, although it may be true that there are like some unqualified internationals applying to these kind of IB schools, this is not really significantly affecting the admissions rates, and I couldn't find any data to really back up this point. But although we can kind of see that it's most likely true, there's not really any hard data, so I'd place this as not very important. And this is something that people don't bring up, geographic diversity. It's possibly relevant depending on where you live. If you live in a country which is underrepresented in Ivy League schools, you'll have a buff in the admissions process, and if you live in an overrepresented country, you will have a debuff in the admissions process. Unfortunately, you can't control this, but you can control some of these other factors, and we'll talk about now what internationals can do to bump up their admissions rates. We've seen what you can change. One of the things you can't change is quotas, and the other thing is geographic diversity. But you can change financial aid and applicant quality, which are still factors. Additionally, there's other things that internationals can do that domestic applicants simply cannot do. So, number one, internationals, there's some basic stuff. Be aware of requirements and work towards them. A lot of the time, internationals don't even know about counselor or teacher recs, and they don't start building good counselor or teacher relationships until maybe the 12th grade or whatever the final year is. This is very bad for international students because their reference letters are going to seem relatively weak compared to domestic applicants. So what they want to do, internationals, they want to basically start building up relationships with their counselor, and if you don't have a counselor, that's going to be your vice principal or principal. Just build up relationships with whoever's going to be sending the counselor report for your school, and also try to find some teachers that you can ask for letters of recommendation and start building up relations with them starting in 10th or 11th grade, not the 12th grade. Next thing, some internationals don't take the SAT because it's not really offered. Try your best to take the SAT or ACT. If you do well, I know a lot of schools are need blind, but it can still boost your chances. A 1600 is not going to hurt you, and it's going to put you above a student who doesn't submit their scores unless that student obviously has extenuating circumstances. Additionally, English test and English is very important. Some internationals just get straight up denied because their Duolingo English test or their TOEFL or whatever English test they are taking is just not high enough marks. So make sure you're training English. If English is a subject at your school, make sure you're taking English courses. Luckily, I'm in Canada, so obviously we speak English. Same thing for students from UK, Australia. But if English is not really something that people are speaking in your country, try to learn English because that's going to be necessary for these Ivy League schools. Next, try to take recommended courses. Now, a lot of Ivies would recommend that students take sciences, like 3 units of science. You want a foreign language as well. Take a look at the common data sets of every Ivy that you're applying to and make sure you're trying to take the recommended courses. Because if you're not, that's going to put you at a disadvantage compared to applicants who are. Next thing is extracurriculars. Now, this is what internationals can actually do to increase their chances. competition for something like the American Mathematics Olympiad team is much harder than if you are from a small country like Bulgaria. It's much easier to get on, for example, the Olympiad team for Bulgaria than it is to get in for United States, because the number of spots is the same, but the number of people competing for those spots is higher. So try to get on to these teams, try to basically do things that are unique to your country. I know, for example, in a country, let's say your country there's like a drought going on in one region of your country, what you can do is possibly come up with a solution to fix that drought. No American is going to be able to do that, but you are, because it's unique to your country. And it also helps show you have like it helps to show your geographic diversity if you're from like a less represented region or country. Try to get onto these international teams as well, because they're going to be less competitive from your country, especially from a lot of places. They're looking for geographic diversity. The standards sometimes might even be lower for international applicants from countries that are underrepresented. The final thing is kind of hard, but you want to try your best to get scholarships that will allow you to apply as no need. And for example, at a school like Columbia, this is going to provide you a decent advantage. It's going to also open doors for schools like CMU, which, it's the second best ECS school in the United States, and there's no need. So if you're trying to go here, it'll open the opportunity for you to apply. One such scholarship is the Foreign Service Scholarship that you can get from Singapore, which will basically pay the full cost of your tuition and everything like that at any foreign institution. And you can just get this and it'll allow you to apply as a no need, which is really, really good. I know a lot of countries don't offer these, but if your country does, try your best to get these, because that's going to boost up your chances for need-aware schools like Cornell, Columbia, or UPenn. Alright. Apart from that, a lot of this stuff is in reality out of control, right? You can't control where you live. Even if you it's not very recommended to go move to an entirely new country just to try to win on this geographic diversity. And a lot of people can't even afford to do that. Same thing for quotas, right? International, it's just going to be harder to get in. So even if you would have gone in if you were a domestic applicant, you might just get rejected if you were international one. But that does not mean that it is impossible. There still are ways to improve your chances, like we just outlined here. But I think it's important for international to be aware that it is harder, but you can do something. All right. So thank you guys for watching. Congratulations to everyone who did get admitted. So in the early action, early decision, especially if you're international, huge congrats to all of you. Good luck to everyone who is still applying. I know I didn't get accepted to any schools ED. We'll put out a video about that soon. But good luck to everyone. I know I still have to write a lot of RD apps, which I kind of procrastinated on. Hopefully you guys all get into the school that you really want to. We're all gonna make it, guys. And yeah, leave any questions you have, comments, suggestions, whatever in the comments. Like if you think it was a helpful video, and subscribe if you want to see more content like this. All right, bye guys.